All right, we are live. Welcome to a Monday afternoon edition to Blind Eye Live. I will eventually get my camera figured out. Um, it is March 21st, 2022, and got another big quarterback trade today. Matt Ryan going to the Indianapolis Colts. I have adjusted my audio, so anyone who is tuned in live, if you'll put in the chat whether the audio is improved from where it's been or if it's too loud. I felt like my audio levels were a little quiet, so I decided to make that shift. Or, if you're listening to this after the fact, if you could leave a comment on the video. I'm trying to I need to check out and see comments afterward. I haven't been checking the last couple weeks. But anyway, welcome to the show. I am your host, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, and I can't talk today. Couldn't talk hardly yesterday either. Tongue just twisted into knots, apparently. But yeah, Matt Ryan to Indy. I think at the end of the show Friday, Deshaun Watson, it was announced, I guess around the time I went live it got announced. But I don't think we knew the whole package until near the time the show went off the air. But I didn't talk about it on the show Friday. But we know what the Texans got for Deshaun Watson. And paired with that topic, I want to talk about some sports media double standards today as well. Because the Deshaun Watson situation, in my opinion, has brought out some major, and just it proves what a lot of us have seen for a long time, but I think really bears out the double standard that he is being treated with compared to other athletes and past coverage of other athletes. Not necessarily their treatment, because some of them have been treated the same way or were treated like pariahs, but in a very different way, despite the fact that there was more truth or there was actual evidence and convictions in how they were treated. And the media treated them, I'd argue, better than they treated Watson. So we'll get into that later. So I have a bit of a headache today, so I won't be pulling up any articles. I have looked at some stuff already today. So there have been some other signings. Falcons have made some moves other than the Ryan trade today we'll get into as well once we get into the Matt Ryan subject. I will say, just to start off the show, the NCAA tournament March has been madness. We've already got 2 1 seeds out of the tournament. Or I believe we've got 2 1 seeds out of the tournament, right? Or I might be wrong. No, I think I'm confusing Kentucky as a 1 seed. They were a 2 seed. But we have a bunch of the top seeds have fallen. Tons of upsets. I mean, the fact that St. Peter's, a 15 seed, is in the Sweet 16 is incredible. They took down Murray State in round 2, who was 30-2 coming into the tournament and were still a 7 seed. I get they were Missouri Valley Conference, but the Missouri Valley Conference is a good conference, one of the best mid-major conferences. But, I mean, Baylor lost. Kentucky lost. Arizona almost lost in round 2. Iowa got upset in the first round. Illinois is out. Tennessee got dropped by Michigan. I mean, and I haven't gotten through all of them. because I will be honest, I haven't looked at the entire bracket. I've basically talking about the ones that I've seen, that I've been following. But Tennessee being out of the tournament, I might give some cursory glance, but I'm not the world's biggest college basketball fan. I do follow players. I do follow like prospects and stuff because I follow the NBA fairly closely. But that's really outside of the University of Tennessee. College basketball is something I'm not like keeping track of, except for certain or like a certain number of players. I do pay attention to those kind of narratives of draft prospects, but that's about it. But this tournament has been crazy, and I want to say, because I'm going to tie this into college football, there's a big push to expand the college football playoff, which is a bad idea. It is a bad idea. If you really love college football, and you have loved college football for a long time, if you really care about the health of the sport, I want you to be completely honest and answer for yourself. And throw it in the chat right now or whatever, or leave me a comment on the show and answer this. Do you feel like the health of college football, like, do you feel like college football as a sport, the integrity, everything about it, do you feel like it's, even though I think this past season is arguably the greatest season I can remember in my entire life watching college football, one of the most fun seasons I followed. But if we're looking at the long-term health of the sport, everything with NIL, the playoff, everything, do you really feel like college football's product as a whole is as healthy as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Because personally, as great as this season is, there are certain things that have me worried. Like, I don't like that the name, image, likeness stuff. Like, I'm for NIL. I don't like that the NCAA hasn't made any, not that I trust the NCAA to do things right, but they're not right now. The NIL stuff is the Wild West right now, and I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for players. And there's a lot of talk about college football becoming like semi-pro. Like, people are still, even though we've gotten NIL, people are still talking about paying players. Schools shouldn't be paying players. They're not employees. They should not be employees of the universities. And yes, college football is a big business. I like the NIL stuff for taking care of players. That's what I like. And I would be okay if people wanted to sponsor, if outside people want to sponsor all the players on teams, like what happened with, I know University of Miami last year, there was a local gym that paid every scholarship football player for the University of Miami a certain amount of money as a sponsorship, as part of a sponsorship partnership with the university. I think that's fine. Now, your mileage may vary on that. That's the kind of stuff I'm okay with. That's how players should be getting paid. It shouldn't be through the universities. That money should be going into the university's coffers. It should be going into facilities. It should be going into athletic programs. Because if it doesn't, it's going to be the death of a lot of smaller sports programs and a lot of women's sports programs. And this is the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand when it comes to college athletics. The football program pays for almost everything. Your men's basketball program as well. Some colleges, their men's baseball program is going to make money. That's basically it. I think the only women's program that makes money right now for their university might be UConn. There are some over the years that have made profits. I think that the Lady Vols used to make money for the school, like used to be positive, but I'm not even sure about that. And there's a reason if you tune in and watch any of the women's tournament games, until the Final Four, all the regionals are basically home arenas for the top seed. or the top seeds from a region, because they can't afford to rent out these big arenas for the women's tournament because they don't make that much money, and because attendance would be down. The reason they can't get these different arenas is because if they don't make them home games for someone in the tournament, if they don't put them in these college towns, they're not going to sell the tickets. This isn't like the men's tournament where people are like gangbusters fighting, to get tickets. And that's just business. And I'm not saying that to dog the women's game. That's not it. Like, I love that there's women's athletics. There's a bunch of, like, I had a cousin who was a really good competitive softball player growing up. I love those opportunities for scholarships, and for competitors. But women's college softball those programs don't make schools money like the football, basketball programs do. I mean, and especially the football programs. There's so much money in college football. Give me a second. So I just heard something, and I mean, through my headphones, I just heard what sounded like an explosion off in the distance. Could have been a number of things. It could have been a car exhaust. It could have been something really heavy hitting the ground off in the distance. But could have been a transformer popping. Although my power's fine here. That was wild. But anyway, getting back to the money in college sports and where it's going, there is something to be said, and Josh Pate on Late Kick on 24/7 Sports, highly recommend the show. He is, in my opinion, maybe the most authentic and genuine voice of college football and voice of college football fans in the country, and a big inspiration to my show. Josh Pate, has, and I mirror some of the same opinions of him in this regard too, or on multiple facets of this topic. The coaches' salaries and and a lot of the facility spending is a result of how much money's in the sport and trying to throw your expenses up and make it look like, hey, we're barely breaking even. There is some funky accounting in, and I said funky accounting in college athletics, that schools do, but putting money in facility spending, staff spending, and university spending, I think is totally fine. I think that college programs, these are state-run institutions, by the way, for the most part. University of Miami is a private school, and I think there's a difference there. You might, with private schools compared to state schools, I think the employment part of it might be a little more interesting. But for any school that's getting state funding and getting taxpayer money, all of the framework at these universities, and yes, there are boosters and stuff, but the framework there was built on state money, on taxpayer money. And I'm sorry, taxpayers should not be paying should not be paying a salary to a kid to play for a sports team, because that's what it is, or that's what it would be, and I don't think that's proper at all. I think NIL is the best way to do this. For if our players making money off their name and likeness and their talent. Schools should not be paying players. College sports do not need to become semi-pro. To be honest, I'd probably stop watching at that point, and would just watch only NFL. I'd be really upset. And people who are talking about this should be the way, or this is the future, those people need to be gotten out of the industry. They need to be taken as far away from college sports as possible. And what I got into, or where I got to this, was talking about the college football playoff and all this stuff, the health of the sport. People are talking about expanding the playoff. I know this whole thing wasn't in my headlines or whatever, but this is something I wanted to talk about today. The health of college football. What makes college football what it is the regular season. Yes, the champions matter, but they matter because of the regular season. They matter because of the work that was put in during the regular season, the results gotten out of the regular season. And if we expand the playoff, it's just like in college basketball. An 18-14 Michigan team that did not deserve a tournament invite. Based on talent, yes. You can argue they were one of the 68 best teams in the country. Michigan did not earn, with their regular season, a shot at the national title. Yet here they are in the Sweet 16. And I'm not salty because they beat the Tennessee Volunteers, my team. Tennessee had that game, and they threw away that game. They had every opportunity to put a stranglehold in that game, and they blew it. And I love those guys, and I love the effort they put in. It's a great team that I love the guys on this team. This is not to say that, they're a bunch of chokers that we'll all laugh at forever or be disappointed. I'm not disappointed in the guys. But Michigan was given an opportunity that they didn't earn, that they did not deserve. They should not be one of the final 16. They shouldn't be in discussion for a national championship. I don't want college football to be that way. Because everyone's talking about the expanded playoff and da-da-da-da-da. And I've seen people with an 8-team format, what it would have looked like this year. Utah would have been involved. Utah was a 3-loss conference champion, if I'm remembering correctly. And they got plastered by Ohio State. Or Ohio State's offense had a field day in the Rose Bowl against Utah. It would be a joke if Utah was playing or was in that playoff, despite being the Pac-12 champion. An absolute joke. And that's not a disservice to and I'm not saying that to say that Utah sucks. That's not it. Their coach, Kyle Whittingham, is an amazing coach. They are a well-coached team. They play their butts off. But this year's Utah team was not worthy of a national title shot. We got the best 4 teams in the country. We got the best 4 resumes in the country in that playoff. I think a 4-team playoff is enough. If anything, I think people would have been more happy if we'd had the BCS set up, because we would have gotten Georgia, Michigan for the national title. Or, not Georgia. Well, actually, people would have been upset because it would have been Alabama and Michigan or whatever. Yeah, Alabama and Michigan. But people might have been more happy with that, actually. But, this year, the whole myth thing that everyone came in the year with was, a group of 5 school like Cincinnati We'd already seen it. They can't make it in the current. We need to expand so those teams get a fair shot. Well, Cincinnati made it, and they got obliterated by Alabama. Their offense didn't do anything. And their defense got run all over. They actually slowed down Bama's pass offense to a large degree. But Brian Robinson had the game of his career against them. They really looked like they didn't belong with Alabama. And Alabama lost to Georgia in the title game. This is the same Cincinnati team as last year with most of the same talent. They lost some guys to the league, but this year's team definitely was better. They, gave it to Georgia last year. They gave Georgia all they could handle and lost. Or in that bowl game. And that's not to say, Cincinnati earned their playoff spot. We don't need an 8-team playoff. Notre Dame did not deserve to make the playoff. I'm sorry, the regular season is what matters. What you do matters. If we expand to 8 teams or 12 teams, what we're going to get is, this term that's come around, these meaningless bowl games. The bowl games are only meaningless because the media keeps saying they're meaningless and they mean nothing. People keep saying they mean nothing. They don't mean nothing. They do mean something. Players only started opting out of bowl games because media types keep saying that they're irrelevant. Why do these media people say they're irrelevant? Because they want something that doesn't exist. They want this playoff because they can make money off of it. The people who want to expand the playoff really and truly, the ones who are really pushing it and the ones that will benefit from it, aren't doing it for the betterment of the sport. They're doing it for the betterment of their pocketbooks. Guess what? When you're making decisions solely based on profit margins, typically, you're not doing something for the health of the sport or the health of the product and its customer. It's one of the reasons lately, to me, or a lot of the technology stuff, like Apple products. There was a time where Apple products really were, in my opinion, better. But then there became this fandom cult for Apple. And Apple is basically rode that. Their stuff is priced ridiculously now. And you could argue it has been for a while. But to me, the product has suffered. And there's a hype and a price tag around the product that doesn't match the actual product. And that's what the playoff has done, is doing to college football. Because what you're hearing is, to me, I just hear all this dissatisfaction, and I'm hearing all these complaints, when, to me, we just had arguably the greatest college football season of my 25 years. I've watched college football for 24 seasons or something like that. 1998 being the first one. Tennessee goes undefeated, wins the first ever BCS National Championship. The first time we had an actual national championship game to determine who really is number one. Trying to take the 2 best resumes. Now, you could argue the BCS didn't do the best job that year. Clearly Tennessee deserved it because they were the last undefeated team standing. And Florida State was a conference champion, 2-loss conference champion. And the issue was that year, you had some undefeated teams going in the last week of the season, like UCLA, who lost to Miami the last week of the year. But they were still their conference champion out in the Pac-12. They just ended the season on a loss. They probably should have been playing Tennessee. Texas A&M was undefeated. Or Kansas State was undefeated. Big 12 championship game hits. Kansas State loses that game to A&M. and that knocks them out. I mean, it was pretty wild because at that time there was a lot of controversy about if all three of those teams won on the final week, who were the two. And we ended up having through those early years, there were some questionable choices for who made the national title game. The year LSU beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma was coming off I believe was coming off a loss in the Big 12 title game, if I remember correctly, and yet they still got the shot. That, of course, was the year that USC won the Rose Bowl against Michigan, and they were the AP national champions. It was the first time in the BCS era we had co-national champions where the AP number one wasn't the same as the BCS number one. And then, of course, the next year was the year where USC, Oklahoma, and Auburn are all undefeated, and they put Oklahoma over Auburn, which part of that is because the BCS model was so new. Instead of putting in years of data, and it was working off years of data, but it wasn't weighted properly. A team like Auburn, because of how successful Oklahoma had been, a team like Auburn didn't get enough credit, despite definitely being better than Oklahoma that year. They should have been the team to play USC. But for the most part, the BCS got things right, because arguably the best team in the country, I would say, won the title every year in the BCS era. Some people will disagree with that. I don't. The playoff so far, I think, has gotten the four best teams every year except for one. And that year was hard because you could argue there were 6 teams. I think that, what was that? 2015, I think, is the year I'm thinking. It was the year where Baylor and TCU split the Big 12 title game. Or the Big 12 title, because they didn't have a title game. And there were definitely 5 teams that year with a legit claim. And it ended up kind of being 6, because Baylor and TCU both were left out. Even though I think they were both top 5 teams, because voters couldn't decide, because they shared a conference title, and one team had a win over the other. Baylor had a win over TCU, but TCU's one loss was better than Baylor's one loss because TCU's was to Baylor. It was really weird. And I know I'm kind of getting a little rambly, but if we expand the playoff, we're going to end up with teams that don't deserve a shot at the national title playing in a playoff for the national title. And to me, more so in football than basketball. Basketball is a game where teams can get hot and cold really quick. There's so much shooting the basketball and putting it in that hoop, especially from distance, which in March, guard play is the most important thing. Being able to knock down tough shots or outside shots is so important. And that is even for the best players, Steph Curry had a really bad stretch of, after starting the season on fire, he had a really bad long slump this year. Anybody can go cold for 3-4 games. Or in the Tennessee Volunteers case, they can be hot for, weeks. And then all of a sudden their shooting disappears in one game. And they get barely upset by Michigan. And literally the difference is instead of going 2 of 18 from 3, if they'd gone 4 of 18, they win that game. And that still would have been poor shooting by their standards. Imagine a team, if they had just shot 23% from three instead of like whatever one of 9 or like 1/9 is. Or let's say like 5/18, like 6/18 would have been, a third of their shot or of their 3-point attempts, which is below what we had been shooting. I mean, it's just crazy. In football, you don't typically have those kind of like there is high variance plays in football. Like, yes, anything can happen on a Saturday in the fall. That's one of the things that makes college football so great. But we shouldn't nullify those upsets. We're going to nullify some of those games by expanding the playoff. We're making it easier for elite teams like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. Like this argument that the best way to unseat those teams is to make the playoff bigger so there's more chances for them to lose. In my opinion, you're giving them more chance or bigger chance to win. Because Georgia's only made the college football playoff twice. Both times they've made the national title game against Alabama, and they're 1-1 in those games. But you're giving the opportunity for when Alabama does have an off year by their standards. If you expand it to 8 teams, 2-loss Alabama's probably going to be in that field of 8. A 2-loss Georgia likely ends up in that field of 8. And do you really want that level of talent getting a shot, especially potentially more motivated than they've ever been because they've had a down year and these guys are like, I don't want to be that worst Nick Saban team or that Nick Saban team that didn't live up to it. Like, I don't want to be part of that group. You know, I mean, that's my thing. You're giving opportunity to Ohio State when they don't deserve it. Ohio State would have been close to making it this year. I know everybody with their 8s had it different ways, but this is the funny thing with the playoff committee. If you expand it to 8 teams, Ohio State being on the outside looking in and being lower ranked than, say, Oklahoma State or Baylor or Ole Miss or Utah, the playoff committee is going to find a way to move Ohio State up a couple spots. Instead of being the 10th best team, they're going to be that 8th best team. Because we see it all the time. We see it with the NCAA selection committee for the basketball tournament, and I would argue that based on what everybody's telling me, like their perception is based on the playoff structure, they believe that the committee, pushes certain teams up. You're just giving them more leeway to do that with more teams. You're going to give them the ability to throw Notre Dame in there more often than maybe they should. You're going to give them the opportunity to keep Ohio State in that discussion, these bigger national brands. And I'm just saying, just wait until USC, like if Lincoln Riley gets USC to that 10-win threshold, if you expand the playoff, USC is going to be sneaking in there all the time. That's all I'm saying. If you really think that the NCAA is corrupt, and you think there are all these biases that have kept teams out of the 4-team, you're just giving the committee more spots to do that with. And you're robbing the regular season of its value. Because now one loss isn't going to kill you. And it should. As short as the college football season is, we want the most dominant team to be the national champion for the season. Sorry, my nose got itch that won't go away. I don't know why I just held my headphones out in front of my face like that. That was weird. Wow, how did I end up so far to the side there? All right. Anyway, yeah, did not. There we go. Anyway, I'm just saying. I think people are misguided if they think that expanding the playoff is going to make college football better, and that it's going to give more teams a shot. In theory, sure. Yes, it's going to put more teams in the playoff. Yes, it might give certain teams a better shot at getting a playoff spot. Getting a playoff spot does not make you a championship team. And I think we're also robbing teams that have put in the real work and have earned a shot at the title. I would argue we're taking away from the work that they've already done. Because I'm sorry, in my opinion, if you've got 2 losses, now if we had like some crazy college season where we had a bunch of 2-loss teams and 1 or 2 of them were going to have to make the title, or I mean the playoff, we might change some of this discussion. But right now, we don't have 2-loss teams making the playoffs as it stands, and they shouldn't now. They shouldn't. That's not who we should be fighting to get shots. We don't need to expand the playoff. And we need to stop talking about bowl games as being meaningless, the other bowl games. They do matter. The Rose Bowl matters, whether it's a playoff game or not. These are chances for players to show off at the end of the season. Like, maybe have a little bit more fun of a game. Like, championships aren't on the line anymore. Sure. But there's competitive pride that should be on the line. And for a lot of guys, it's one last chance to show out for scouts. And I think their teammates who maybe have already feel like they've made their case, and the players who've been skipping out, I think you're doing a disservice to your teammates because you're harming their ability in a lot of cases to be a part of one last winning performance. Now, in some cases, maybe you're helping or you're allowing guys to elevate and get a bigger role by stepping aside. But that doesn't always mean you're helping them. Because, in my opinion, if Alontae Taylor plays for Tennessee in the game against Purdue, there's not a chance for the referees to hand Purdue the game, to hand them the W. Because that's what happened. The referees gave Purdue a win. Pure and simple. And anyone who says otherwise is stupid. It's just like last year, the referees stole a game from Mississippi State. They handed Memphis a win. If you think that's not what happened, you're stupid. And I don't like to, it's like, I don't use that lightly. I don't say stuff like that lightly. But if you can say that, if you can watch those games and you see the 2 teams and the work they put out on the field, and you don't come away with the referees decided those games, you're either being willfully ignorant or you're being toxic. I mean, that's all I can say. Same with Ole Miss, Arkansas. The referees helped Ole Miss against Tennessee as well. Ole Miss got the benefit of a lot of referee calls during the course of this college football season. I'd argue they have 2 wins that they shouldn't because of the referees and how they called games. And I mean, it was like, and despite that, I still think this is the greatest college football season ever. The referees hurt and took away certain games that if they had not been as prominent in their outcomes, there'd be no question from anybody that this was the greatest college football season ever. And I pray that we don't get this expanded playoff, and I pray that fans will not give in to these stupid media narratives. And there's some people who care about college football who really believe that expanding the playoff will improve the sport. I implore you to really look into your heart of hearts. Really look over why you love college football and tell me how expanding the playoff matches up with those values. Because I'm sorry, I really don't think that you'd have been happy if we had an expanded playoff and Utah had ended up your national champion this year. To move on from that, now we're going to get into the stuff that I put on the ticker or in my title and put on my Twitter. Matt Ryan is an Indianapolis Colt as of this afternoon. That deal, Atlanta got a third-round pick from Indianapolis as part of this trade. I think this is a big win for Indianapolis and Frank Reich. People can say that Matt Ryan has been, declining as a quarterback. I'd argue it's because in certain ways the team has declined around him. I do believe last year Atlanta had upgraded in the front office and at head coach. There's some Atlanta fans who, I saw some stupid stuff on Twitter like, we hire Fontenot from the New Orleans and he destroys the team. It's like that team was about to fall apart. The whole point of bringing him in was to do what is happening right now. To tear things down to the studs so something better can be rebuilt. Because if you build on a flawed foundation, the product is going to be flawed from then on. The Falcons roster and the cap issues that it has, this is the hard part. And Atlanta's going to incur the biggest dead cap hit of any team ever. With a $40+ million dead cap hit for Matt Ryan this year. And they need to eat it. They need to. Because this is going to benefit them in the long term. Shed salary, get young players. The Falcons also after that, they signed Marcus Mariota to a free agent contract. I didn't see a money number on there yet. But before I went live, I saw that they had signed Marcus Mariota. And he is familiar with head coach Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith was a position coach and then offensive coordinator in Tennessee. I believe he had become offensive coordinator by the time that Mariota, or while Mariota was still on the team. I'm trying to remember. Smith was on the offensive coaching staff, though, so he is familiar with Mariota. And Mariota has not been a super successful quarterback in the league. This guy has quarterbacked teams to the playoffs. Well, I know he's quarterbacked the Titans to the playoffs. He has won a playoff game in which he is one of the reasons the Titans won that playoff game. And I'd argue if you're talking about quarterbacks who deserve a second shot, Mariota is someone who should be at the top of the list. I would take him over Mitchell Trubisky. Does Trubisky maybe have a higher ceiling? Sure. But Mariota was the better college quarterback by far. And I would argue if you look at their NFL track records, Mariota's been the better pro quarterback too. And despite the fact he was drafted 2 years before Trubisky, they're the same age. And he has more starting experience in college and the pros than Trubisky. Or at least as much in the pros, but he definitely had more in college. So I think this is a solid move for the Falcons. And I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback with the 8th overall pick. I think that's why they signed Mariota. They're still rebuilding. I have a feeling I think Atlanta was shocked that they won 7 games this year. And they won them all against really bad opponents. I mean, you're talking about wins against the Jets, the Panthers. Trying to think of some of the other teams they beat. I believe they beat the Giants this year. I need to look at their schedule. I have looked at their schedule, and I don't believe they beat a single team with a winning record last year. And went 7-10. So I would expect them to take potentially another step back, because a lot of people had them as the worst team in the league coming into the year. I thought that was a stretch, because Matt Ryan is still a really good quarterback. They had Calvin Ridley at the start of the year. I thought Kyle Pitts was going to have a big impact in year one, and he did have a sizable impact. Cordarrelle Patterson, Arthur Smith turned him into the do-it-all player that a lot of people believed he could be for several years now. And I would argue as well that, and the defense played pretty decent, considering where people thought it would be. I mean, A.J. Terrell was awesome in year 2. So, the Falcons getting a 3rd-round pick out of Matt Ryan and taking that cap hit, it stings, but this is a move that needed to be done. And Falcons fans, look, this stuff was coming. You weren't getting better. You were not going to turn into a contender again without tearing things down. It wasn't happening. For the Colts, I think this is a big win, because this is, in my opinion, this is an upgrade from Wentz. People could say Ryan's had some bad games, whatever. Ryan was in a tough situation, not always with the best coaching during the Dan Quinn era. Once Kyle Shanahan left, I believe each offensive coordinator was successively worse than the previous one. And there were injury issues with the team at different times. I mean, there was a lot going on. I think Reich's going to get the best out of Ryan that we've seen in a few years. They have pieces. If anything, I think we're going to see a really great offense for Ryan that's going to be heavily based off play action and do a lot of the things that the Falcons offense under Kyle Shanahan did really well with the Falcon, or did really well. It's not going to be it's not the same scheme, because Reich does not run the Shanahan offense, but Reich's offense is really, really good. And I think this is going to improve. I think this is going to expand their passing offense and the kind of concepts they're going to be able to run with their passing offense. And I think this is going to be a great get for Michael Pittman. I think Ryan's going to get more out of Michael Pittman, who's a really talented young physical receiver. It'll be interesting to see what the Colts do in the draft now and for the rest of free agency. But I mean, I like this trade for both teams. I like the Falcons getting a day 2 pick out of Ryan. And yeah, they're having to eat the financial costs. This is just stuff that happens with rebuilds. I will say I do find it really interesting that the Colts didn't try to get Baker, and the Browns might have too high of a price tag on Baker. I don't know, but if I was the Browns, I'd have accepted. As much as they invested number 1 pick in Baker. Well, the previous regime did. If they're expecting more than a 3rd round pick out of Baker after what the Browns have done to Baker's image and value, and in trading for Watson and signing Jacoby Brissett, like everybody knows, like, look, y'all have got to dump Baker. So don't come at us and say you're going to get this, because you're not. Because, at this point, and the Saints have re-signed Jameis Winston, and those numbers have come out to, it's a 2-year, $28 million deal, so $14 million a year, which that's double, I think, because I think Mitchell Trubisky signed a 2-year, $14 million deal with Pittsburgh. If you're looking at $14 million a year for Winston in New Orleans, it would be interesting because I think Baker would be a great fit down there. But I don't think they're not gonna trade a day 2 pick for Baker. Obviously, Washington doesn't need a quarterback now. San Fran, man, the Jimmy Garoppolo market hasn't materialized apparently, or the Niners have been asking too much. One of the two. Well, I really don't know who would trade for a quarterback now. The Texans don't need to. They have the ability to, if they want to draft a young quarterback this year, they have the picks to do it. And they have a young quarterback in Davis Mills who played pretty good at the end of the year, in my opinion. I think he deserves to get the shot this year. And I think for the Texans, they should give it to him, because if he can be the guy long term, like if he can be a top half of the league quarterback or a top 20 quarterback on his rookie deal, they've got future cap space, and they've got a lot of draft capital to build around him and build something, and build a team that can carry, a slightly above average, or like an average to above average starter to the Super Bowl and win. If they nail the picks, we'll see if this front office can do that. Because a lot of people don't believe they have it in them. But, at this point, I can't think of another team that would go after quarterback. The Steelers have gone with Mitchell Trubisky. So, I think it's going to be really interesting. I'd have to think of what teams right now would potentially need another quarterback. If the Dolphins traded for Baker or Jimmy. Oh, wait, they signed Teddy Bridgewater to back up Tua. So, they have their veteran backup. The Eagles, it could be interesting, but is Garoppolo really going to give you more than Hurts if you factor in Hurts' mobility and what he did for the running game? Is Baker really, and his price tag and his 5th-year option season, is that really worth is that really going to be worth more than Hurts? I don't know. I think it'd be interesting for the New York Giants to see. Obviously, I think everything they're doing this offseason is to maximize Daniel Jones in his 4th season to see if he's the guy. The only team really left now, if we're talking quarterback carousel at this point, that's left, empty-handed to me is Carolina Panthers. And if I'm them, I'd be going after Baker Mayfield, absolutely. And really, unfortunately for the Niners, if I was an NFL GM, I'd be calling about Baker Mayfield before Jimmy Garoppolo. But Carolina's really the only team, empty-handed right now. Now Washington it'd be interesting to see Washington maybe pounce on somebody, but they've got Taylor Heineke. They traded for Wentz, so I don't think they'd do that. The Steelers could bring in another veteran, but I don't think they do. So, it's interesting. It's really interesting because there are teams that have starting quarterbacks that are not better than Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo. Because I don't think Trubisky is. I think in most people's eyes, Mariota's not. But those guys are the number ones for those teams. And I don't think either... the Falcons could trade for Baker. That's an option they did have after trading Ryan, and they didn't want to give up draft compensation to do that. Obviously. Steelers obviously have not wanted to give up draft compensation, it seems, to acquire a ho-hum veteran. They didn't want to shell out the price to get one of the top guys. It's going to be interesting to see if the Browns release Baker. The 49ers, I don't see them releasing Jimmy Garoppolo if they can't trade him. And the 49ers very openly said, hey, we're going to try and move you to a contending team. Right now, if I'm the Eagles, I don't believe in Hurts as a long-term NFL starter. I would be on the phones for Baker. Because I still think Baker's a really good quarterback. And I think you pair him with someone or you put him in the Eagles' offense behind their offensive line with the talent they have in their backfield, with Devontae Smith, and I believe one of their first-round picks is going to be on a receiver. I think Baker's going to utilize that better than Hurts is or has and will. I think Jimmy Garoppolo would fit really well in Philly, and they'd be able to shift their offense, I think, more in line with what Nick Sirianni wants to do as an offensive coordinator. But that's just me. And I did talk about the Texans a second ago. The haul they got for Watson's pretty impressive. So, like I said, I mentioned the Watson news, because it dropped during my stream Friday. The details are, the Texans are getting 3 first-round picks from the Browns. They're getting their 22, 23, and 24 first-round picks. They're getting 3rd and 4th-round picks as well, and they're sending back a 5th-round pick. Or they're sending a 5th-round pick with Watson to Cleveland. 3 first-round picks, straight up. Because there's only been one other trade where a team got 3 straight-up first-round picks without throwing in their first-round pick. That's the Herschel Walker trade. So you're talking, it has been over 30 years since anyone got this kind of return. Now, you can argue, some of these teams that got or that had a first-round pick as part of the trade and got, a higher first-round pick and 2 future firsts and a second and what have you in the future, have gotten, throw those returns up there with this. You might be able to talk about that. Like the Rams, what they got for trading down just 4 spots with Washington in 2012. 2 future firsts, a second. I think they got another. I think they got a day 3 pick out of it too. The Titans, when they got the first round pick or the number 1 overall pick in 2016 after drafting Marcus Mariota number 2 overall in 2015, they traded down to 15, as well as getting 2 first round picks, some other stuff, and then they used some of that to move back up to 8 and draft Jack. Is it Jack Conklin, who's now playing for the Browns? Was an all-pro his rookie season, dealt with some injuries, and then, or at least was a Pro Bowler his rookie season. I know he made an all-pro team in one of his first 2 seasons, got hurt. We declined his 5th-year option, let him walk in free agency. I still wish he was a Titan, but whatever. Titans got a lot of value out of that deal, but getting just 3 straight-up first-round picks for a quarterback who did not play for you, who wasn't going to play for you this year, and who you wanted gone. Texans wanted Watson out of there. With everything, they got 3 first-round picks, a 3rd and a 4th. Yeah, they sent a 5th, but whatever. You're moving up maybe a full round or 2/3 of a round from the 5th to 4th round. And then you're getting 3 firsts and a 3rd. That's a lot. Especially, once again, this guy didn't play for him last year. This guy was creating no value for you at the time. And with all the legal baggage and all the controversy around him, and this will end up leading into my other big topic for the day. Eventually, Watson providing no value for you to get this much is just insane. So the Texans are going to have the number 4 and number 13 picks in this year's draft. They could really overhaul their front 7. They could, if they wanted, I'm looking at number 4. You're looking at the potential, at 4 and 13, getting, say at 4, you could get Kevon Thibodeau. You could get Tavon Walker. You could maybe get Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu. You could go, if you wanted, you could get Kyle Hamilton if you think he's that good. Personally, I'm not sold. I'm not as sold. I think his tape's really good. I do still have some questions. And I don't love his top end speed. I get he plays really fast on tape, but there's certain things where I'm like, that top speed is going to matter as a deep free safety. And somewhat in sideline-to-sideline coverage, playing underneath in coverage, which is, his strong suit and, box-to-box sideline ability. He's got to be perfect. His mind has to be perfect for him to be at his best. I'd need to look up Troy Polamalu's 40 time, but I'm pretty sure it was much faster than a 4.59. And he and Ed Reed are arguably the 2 smartest safeties I've ever seen. So to me, those guys weren't top 10 picks, weren't top 5 picks. So why would I take Hamilton up there, in my opinion? Like Sean Taylor, Eric Berry are guys who deserve to be picked that high. I don't know if Hamilton is. I don't love that value, especially not in a really good safety class like this is further down with, elite athletes for the safety position. This is one of the most athletic safety class I've ever seen. This might be the most athletic safety class I've ever seen, like especially pairing athleticism and tape, like Louis Cine, Jaquan Brisker, Daxton Hill, just to name like a few of these guys. Like, I love Hamilton's tape, but I'm not convinced he's that much better than those other guys to go that high, especially with, his combine numbers. And his jumps were great. But that 4.59 40, like 40s aren't everything. But I think it's a little difference between him and like Treylon Burks. Burks is faster than that 4.55 40. Like, he's got football speed. He's built like a running back. He's built kind of wide and thick. And guys with his body type sometimes have trouble in the 40. That's why a lot of running backs, you see them run like these 40 times that don't seem that fat or that are kind of slow. And then you see him on the football field, it's like, Alvin Kamara ran a 4.56 in the 40? Do what? Like Derrick Henry and Leonard Fournette. Derrick Henry ran like, I think, a 4.52. The dude pretty much every year clocks in as like on one of his bigger runs as like the fastest running back in the league or one of the fastest. You take all the big, long running back runs, and it's like Derrick Henry's top speed. Because some guys have better build-up speed. Like, they can accelerate for longer distances. Maybe they don't get to their top speed as quick as some other guys, but they're still building momentum after other guys would have stopped building momentum. Last year, Treylon Burks had a play where, he outran all of Alabama's defense. He's pulling away, and there are guys, we have their times. They ran faster 40s. What's this guy's name? Is it like Jalen Amore Davis or out of Bama, one of their corners? Ran in the low 4.4s. He ran like a tenth or more than a tenth faster of a second faster in the 40. Burks ran away from him. Outran that entire secondary. That entire defense. So, you need to look at the tape, and the tape's most important. Hamilton's tape's great, but I don't know if he's like a top 10 safety, like a top 10 overall caliber prospect, especially with some of these pass rushers that I think are phenomenal. So back to what the Texans could get, you get Thibodeau. I would rather have Trevon Walker, and I'd rather have Jermaine Johnson for that matter. Johnson might be available at 13. You've got these offensive line guys like Neal and Ekwonu, like I said. At 13, maybe you take Trevor Penning if you go D-line earlier. Maybe you take Devontae Wyatt if he's still on the board. And I think Wyatt, in my opinion, is a top 15. If not, really, if I'm looking at his tape and that, this is kind of the crazy thing. A lot of people had this guy as a borderline first-round guy already. I already had him, top 20, top 25 player. But you see the combine numbers, and you look at the tape and the impact he had, and I'm like, how is this guy not like a top 10 prospect? Jordan Davis. You look at the tools, and I think you could say whatever you want. This guy to me, I understand how a guy like Brett Coleman has him as a top 5 player. I get it. Jordan Davis is a freak. The Texans could snag one of those two guys at 13, most likely. Imagine coming away with a Davis or a Wyatt for your interior. Now, they're not the exact same player, but, one's a nose, one's a 5 technique, 3 technique type. Wyatt, 5 technique, 3 technique. But, if you were grabbing one of those guys at 13, you're getting an edge at 4. That defensive front's ridiculous. Or has ridiculous upside now. You've got multiple second-round picks that you're working with in this draft that you can use to get or to, add to your receiver room. Add to maybe go out. Second round's a great spot this year for linebacker and corner, for that matter, or safety. The Texans, they can go wherever, best player available on their board, whenever. This is a big win for the Texans in that you hate losing the elite talent at quarterback, but his off-field stuff is a distraction. And I've talked on this channel before that I have some big questions about some of the accusers. Some of these accusations are complete bunk. All of them might be. Some of them may be legitimate. The issue is the process that's gone into going after Watson for them, in my opinion, comes across illegitimate to me. So, and there's a reason he hasn't settled yet. And as far as I'm concerned, lawyer Tony Busby, the way he did this was about publicity. This was about shaming parties into doing something, potentially. This didn't go through criminal trial when it should have. All of these accusations, as soon as Busby was made aware, there should have been criminal complaints. Heck, any victim of something should immediately go to the police for their benefit. Because justice for victims. I want victims, real, true victims. I want them to get justice. They deserve it. But the longer people wait, it becomes hard to do. And especially with one-on-one encounters, it's hard anyway. But the longer you wait, the more, it's just plain as day. They're going to get, there will be no justice. The longer you wait, it just plummets the likelihood. But anyway, not to get, I'm not litigating these cases. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, I've not served in any part of the justice system, law enforcement, whatever. I'm just a layman who has read court filings, has asked the opinion of professionals about these things. And that's where my opinions kind of come from on that. To say this, and the reason I say all that is a distraction for the Texans. You don't want these things. The reason Watson's in this situation, in my opinion, is because he put himself in poor situations. He made poor decisions. If you don't want to get 22 civil lawsuits from a bunch of masseuses, maybe don't do anything sexual with those masseuses, whether it was consensual at the time or not. That'd probably be a good idea. That's not, because to be completely honest, as much as what people do in their private time, people's lifestyles, whatever, as long as they're not doing stuff that's illegal or immoral, or I should say if they're not doing stuff that's illegal or hurting other people, that's their business. If I'm running an organization and I knew that my quarterback was doing this or was, dealing with masseuses in this kind of way, even if it was consensual, like, I'm not okay with that. Like, I'd be knock this the heck off. So, the Browns are taking on their own headache because I'm seeing the media go after them for this, But at the same time, and this is where I'm going to transition this into the last topic. Sports media are hypocrites on this. And they have double standards. Because they're completely okay. They're completely, or their coverage of what Larry Nassar did, who is despicable and deserved worse than a prison sentence for what he did. There are stories, there are a number of big stories of sexual abuse to like dudes, to college, like to high school and college athletes who are male, do not get the same coverage. There was one involving I think one of them actually was also Michigan State. I know one was involving the University of Michigan. Saw another that had to do with hockey with the the Chicago Blackhawks during their Stanley Cup runs. The height of Taves, Spezza, Kane in Chicago. They don't like, they covered it, on the website, but it wasn't prominent out in the media. For the last year, everyone's refused to even talk about Watson. This was so bad. This was such a bad situation that you ignored it for the last year until, it came time for the trade to be made. And you look at the Antonio Brown situation. Antonio Brown has criminal, convictions, settlements, and stuff, like assaults. Antonio Brown had multiple sexual assault, sexual harassment allegations against him. Whether true or not, there was not as big a to-do made about Antonio Brown being back in the league. Everyone was more concerned about his mental health than really his actions. And I followed that. The NFL's always been, talent trumps all. Impact on winning trumps all. Look at Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy, legitimately brutally abused a woman. And he was found guilty, but because he requested in the state of North Carolina, you could request a trial by jury or whatever. Or you could choose, I'm trying to remember exactly how it went down. Because it was a judge ruling, I think, but you could choose a trial in front of just a judge or a trial by a jury of your peers, what have you. The witness in between these two things, or the victim, he came to a civil settlement with her. She chose not to show up to the trial. So the original verdict and punishment was annulled. And the Cowboys, scooped him up. And then he did some other stuff, ended up out of the league. But, I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. He was former University of Florida defensive tackle, played for the Niners, something McDonald. He's a big time, really good player for them. I mean, he allegedly choked his pregnant significant other and chucked her onto a couch on top of his guns while threatening to kill her, whatever. He ended up back in the league for a bit afterward. Played for a couple more years or so. And we can go down the list. A lot of people use Zeke Elliott as an example. Ezekiel Elliott, it was proved, by evidence that nothing happened, that she faked it, that they were false allegations. He got suspended 6 weeks for false allegations that we know to be false. People were putting that out there, as, Zeke gets this for whatever, and Ridley gets banned for a calendar year for betting on games, which we had a track record for exactly what betting on games gets you. Ezekiel Elliott was unfairly suspended, and people need to need to stop mentioning Zeke with all these other guys. Joe Mixon and Kareem Hunt have been mentioned recently for stuff they did being caught on video. Which the Kareem Hunt and Joe Mixon situations are very different. But Joe Mixon, which he was suspended in college. I don't know if he got an NFL suspension. I can't remember. But it basically ended his time in college playing. And then for Kareem Hunt, that video, yes, he absolutely assaulted a woman who had already assaulted multiple people and destroyed property. And had lied to them about her age to get alcohol and things of that nature. And once they found out, tried to get rid of her, get her to leave, and that was a crazy situation, which once again, you don't want to be in that situation. Maybe don't party. Maybe don't go to clubs. Maybe don't just allow strangers to hang around you. That would be my suggestion. But when you watch all the video, it's like, you could say whatever you want about Hunt. It's kind of the funny thing about this whole equal society we live in. It does bother me that, so she's supposed to be allowed to do whatever she wants and assault people because she's a woman and she's smaller, so she doesn't get the same repercussions, or, she's supposed to be allowed to do whatever with no consequence. I don't know. Me, I would hope I had the restraint in that situation to not, to not respond. If I was Hunt and in that situation. But, I'll say this, I'm not some jacked football player. I have a visual disability. If some drunk woman, start attacking me and my friends, I'm liable to do or to respond with more force because, I don't have as much leeway with other people as other people. I have a visual disability. It's in some regards, I'm more apt to respond with force because, I might not see if you have something in your hand. Now, I'm not saying she had a weapon. That's not what I'm saying. and I'm a little rambling on this topic. I just am trying to say, like, you know, I try to be empathetic sometimes to the situations I see, with people. Maybe I'm picking the wrong, or sometimes pick the wrong sides to be empathetic to. If you think I am, please leave a comment. I'd appreciate the feedback. All blades need to be sharpened from time to time. But I think the media is wanting to crucify Watson right now. They're wanting to crucify him over allegations because 22, not all of them can be lies. I'm like, okay. So which one's telling the truth? Which ones are true? Which ones are false? We should just assume guilt on all parts. Oh, because statistics say, and there's all these statistics of, how many people get away with stuff. Okay, so we're supposed to accept every accusation as proof of guilt or wrongdoing. I'm not okay with that. I know people who've been falsely accused. I have been with someone, the two of us sitting, chatting, having a good time at the time that they were alleged to have assaulted someone. Like, this is something that happened to a buddy, to a friend of mine. Because some girl was tired of him, or when I say this, like, we were hanging out at a friend's house there was a party, and this guy, he'd had a couple drinks. Every so often he'd flirt with this girl. Never made inappropriate contact with this girl. All this was in front of everybody there. All of it was harmful. All of it was harmful. None of it was harmful. All of it was harmless, is what I'm saying. She got annoyed. So, and the thing was, the next morning, like, the dude apologized. He said he was sorry if he came on a little too strong, or whatever. She claimed that he sexually assaulted her. Despite the fact that everybody was around the entire night. So, of course, all of us stood up for the guy. But, this is the stuff that happens. There was an incident just the next year, same county, with a girl who was in high school, who went to high school with my sister. She would go to parties, drink, sometimes not even drink, like, she constantly slept around. And she would falsely accuse guys after the fact to try and protect her image. Like, that stuff happens. There was a former USC, standout football recruit, who everybody saw as a, big stud. This guy was going to go on to the NFL. Girl he went to high school with accused him of, the hard R. And, sorry, I got to say that for YouTube. Does that, and he gets locked up for years. She got scholarship, and all these perks that helped her out in the future, and destroyed his life, ruined his life, took away his life, and years later admitted to having lied. So no, I don't believe everyone. And I would like to believe everybody who came forward and said they were victims. And I can't. I can't. Because people do lie. That's why we have our justice system. So And our justice system decided not to press charges against him based on the criminal complaint that was eventually filed after all the civil suits came out. So I don't know. Like I'm not okay with just trying to destroy people or say that they should be taken out of society because of an allegation. You know, a lot of people say where there's smoke there's fire. It's like, sure. But it does seem like our media is willing to be where there's smoke there's fire towards certain people and not for others. I don't want to venture into politics or heavily into politics, but I mean, we see it in the political world right now. Allegations against certain people that seem barely founded or seem like, far-fetched. Those are taken seriously or used to destroy people, while the people they're lifting up have similar accusations and they're just thrown away. Or heck, sometimes there's factual information, they just throw it away. And I don't like that, because especially for journalists, as these people want to call themselves, if we aren't, and yes, we have our biases, but if we don't just present facts, if we don't live in the fact world, we're damaging people. Not just the people that, we're not just damaging the Deshaun Watsons. We're damaging our audiences, because we're creating a false narrative in their world. We're ripping them away from truth. And we should be promoting truth. We should be living in truth. But anyway, so there's that soapbox. And maybe, a little bit of a messy way to go through that. I'm not someone who pretends that, we live in a perfect world. And I'm not going to be someone that also, as well, that pretends to be perfect or have, all the perfect best opinions. Because I don't. But I'm trying the best I can. The fact of the matter is, we don't know what happened between Watson and those women. None of the media people know either that are talking about this. That's why we shouldn't make decisions based on, and businesses shouldn't make decisions based on mob opinions or media opinions or opinions from the outside looking in. Now, if a team decided they didn't want to work with Watson because of this, I think that's okay to a certain degree. Because there is, and based on Watson's own admittance, it's like he's admitted to having, like sexual encounters with some of these women. And saying they're consensual. He shouldn't be doing that, as far as I'm concerned. Like in what is for them a professional setting. Like he shouldn't. I wouldn't want that representing my team, personally. Like that, and that's not something I would personally, do or endorse. So, as an employer, I wouldn't be okay with that. However, I don't think that's enough for me to then go and say that no one else should hire the guy. Because if he's telling the absolute truth and they were consensual, I mean, at the end of the day, they're consensual. If that is the truth. And we don't know. And that's my thing. If you don't know 100%, I would suggest showing everybody a little bit of mercy. Because so far, I have seen, I remember when these filings were going down back in the spring, and stuff was going back and forth. Their defense team said that they had Facebook and other social media posts, messages, social media messages with people like family members and friends, or text messages where people were bragging about it, talking about it, like those specific encounters, and in a positive way, like bragging about it. But they didn't come out in public and say and attach those to different people. They're not out. It's like, so far it seemed like Watson's camp has decided, instead of trying to completely and utterly destroy the credit or the character of each of these people, like directly, they've chosen to just be protective of Watson's character. And, maybe that opinion of mine will change in the future with more information eventually coming out. But that's the way it is seen to me, is instead of trying to utterly destroy these people like they are trying to do him, he's just trying to protect his own name. So, with that being said, I think that's about all I've got for today's show. I've gone about an hour and a half. I think that's pretty decent. And I think that's where I would like for the show's length to kind of come around at, for the most part. So I want to thank anybody who's tuned into the show, live or after the fact. I appreciate you. If you'll leave a comment, tell me what I could work on, sharing your opinion on any of the topics I talked about today, maybe critiquing my opinion on some stuff, I'm totally down for that. And I would hope, that if you're tuned in, that you'd have something to say about the show. So please leave that in the comments down below after the fact. And if you like the show, please leave a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more. That's the most flattering thing you can do for me. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday, and I will see y'all tomorrow, hopefully at 3 p.m. So